So now that we've had our first look at the brand new battle groups coming to Company of Heroes 3, I figured we should talk to the two folks primarily responsible for getting them into the game and designing them. First up, Darren, how you doing today?
Doing well. And yep, my name's Darren. I'm one of the game designers and balance designers who have worked on the Australian Defence Battle Group.
And Miguel?
Hello, I'm Miguel, a gameplay designer here, and I worked on the Battlefield Espionage for the deck.
Amazing. So, two brand new battle groups. I know we're really excited to get these into our players' hands, but I kind of wanted to get you both here to talk about their development, maybe some of the big picture goals around these battle groups. So we've had a quick look at the new units, their abilities, how these battle groups are kind of made up. But let's maybe start with the Australian defense. So can you tell me maybe at a really high level, what were some of our design goals with the Australian Defence Battle Group?
Yep. So on the higher level goals, the Australian Defence Battle Group was to be one of those more defensive battle groups. Not quite on the level of Coastal, where it's a lot of structures, but more so in it has a lot of defensive abilities and units that synergize well together. Or because none of the other three British battle groups currently are or defensive. Really, most of them rely more on offense or artillery
Mhm.
to push the line. But we also, for the Australian Defence Battle Group, have something quite special. Although created by one of our designers, I'll reference him here, Marco, we have the CWT supply truck run, which is probably the biggest thing of this battle group and to the Coast series in terms of like its functionality.
Yeah, it's interesting for me to hear you say that because I'm just like, oh, it's just a little supply truck. It just goes to a where it needs to, and it comes back. It seems pretty straightforward, but you're right. It's definitely new for the franchise. Can you maybe talk about why did we decide to pursue that and what that up capability brings to the British forces?
So what this brings to our gameplay is something like new that's not just it's sort of resource manipulation, but not in the sense where you just trade resources for one for the other. There's a lot of counterplay to this one where one player needs to get their truck up to a fuel or munition point, and generally they want to go for one that's much further away from the base
Mhm.
because resources that you get scale with distance. So this does create an interesting sort of play where the player who deploys the truck wants to keep his forces around or near the truck to protect it so it can pick up its payload, come back, and give you a large amount of resources. But the opposing player in return wants to deny this truck for the player or by taking it out through whatever means possible. So it could be your camouflage units, raiding units. However, when the opposing player takes it out, not only are they rewarded with denying that sort of truck, they also get some of the resources that the other player would have in return.
Right. So very high risk, high
Mhm.
reward for the British player. What about you, Miguel? Maybe you can talk about the Battlefield Espionage Battle Group. What were some of our high level design goals with this battle group for the Africa Corps?
hmm So the faction itself lends itself to some very aggressive play, and we thought it made a lot of sense given also some of the historical reasonings on North Africa with the supply lines to include kind of this camouflage slash ambush playstyle for the deck. That was the main inspiration, and we wanted to kind of pursue that kind of flanking maneuver that deck is kind of known for, and its mobility, right?
Cool, very cool. So maybe we could talk about the theming for these battle groups. How did we land on these themes, and how did we approach sort of building them around their respective faction? Darren, maybe you can talk about the Australians first.
Yep, for the Australians, in terms of their gameplay theme, they are heavily based on the more defensive play, with a lot of their units being based on the Australian forces at Tobruk. Though obviously we have a few additions like the Archer Tank Destroyer, which obviously did not see the action at Tobruk. But for the British in general, this provides them a sort of a defensive play style where they can have a lot of setup units or setup emplacements that need to be placed down. But in the early game, actually, the Australian defense is a little bit more aggressive than the British would be. The Australian light infantry can be called in immediately, and they're very good at capturing territory. And they fight better at closer ranges than the standard Tommy squad, though they are worse at long range. But however, as the game progresses you'll find that building their Sangar bags, and once they're equipped with scope rifles, they start turning from this offensive capturing raiding unit into more of a defensive hold unit.
Okay. What Miguel? What about the battlefield espionage? Same thing. Why did we land on this theme, and how does it complement the Africa Corps?
hmm Um, so for the deck, we wanted something that wasn't pure strength in the sense that you don't have like a vehicle like the Archer. We wanted something to kind of complement their already base playstyle. And what we wanted to, or how it complements their playstyle a lot, is that we wanted this feeling of uncertainty when the opponent is playing against this battle group. We want the opponent to play a lot more carefully around the map. So we also wanted the opponent to have a very specific playstyle against it. We wanted to enforce like the usage of scout units to actually detect the ambushes. And the battle group itself also has a lot of emphasis, not the battle group, the faction itself has a lot of emphasis on vehicles. But we wanted something that also made players a lot more comfortable with using their infantry and their team weapons. And the battle group kind of plays a lot around that.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious, how do these new battle groups kind of compare to the existing ones for each faction? Darren, let's maybe start with the British.
Compared to what the other battle groups offer, the British Australian has a bit more resource manipulation, particularly if you base it around the truck, though it also does have like the stronger and cheaper caches. Is to add to it, it in terms of like how it plays compared to the other or battle groups, like it is, as I said, more defensive. The Archer, the 2-pounder, and the emplacements are obviously not units that are able to push up on the field on their own. They are best used when used to support other units on the battlefield. Well, the Australians, though, are a bit more able to stand on their own, unlike the infantry section, at least in an infantry and infantry fight. They are just generally a bit stronger, though they do have their own weaknesses. It's like the Australian light infantry can't really deal with vehicles, so they're a bit more reliant on the 2-pounder or to deal with those vehicles once you've hit a certain point in the game where combined arms start taking more of an effect. However, the battle group still does allow you to play a bit more heavily into like some sort of assaulting role later on. You do have the vehicle over repair, giving all your vehicles more health, allowing you to eventually soak another shot for the most part. And you have a very strong artillery ability in the form of creeping barrage if you're not going with the Archer, if you want to push into the enemy line. And as I said, it's all backed up by the possibility of a strong economy when using the truck.
Okay. Miguel, what about the battlefield espionage battle group? How does it compare to the existing battle groups for the Africa Corps, and what are some of the strengths that it brings to the table?
So this battle group does play a lot differently from other battle groups. And starting from the left side of the tree, it offers a lot of ambushing tools. So you have the Funk Panzerwagen, which enables those ambush operations. Not only that, but it's also a vehicle that we wanted the battle group to play around it. So lots of mining, getting munitions for you to use the other abilities, and combined with the branching choice of, do you want to be better at ambushing vehicles or better at ambushing infantry? It really enhances that ambush operation feeling for the battle group. And then on the end of it, we have Operation Scorpion, which really creates like these moments and opportunities for the DAC player to just destroy or disrupt the supply line of the enemy or the front line. Then on the other side, we have access to some beacons, which really do change the way you play with the DAC and even within the battle group itself. One of them is the Intel beacon, which basically creates these zones of ambush operations. And as the enemy, you need really need to be careful of just going without vision or without scouting the area first.
Mhm.
And you can think that whenever you have, for example, selected the anti-tank ammunitions, that if you're not careful, your vehicles, if they get ambushed, they'll just like get destroyed right away. So again, enforcing that kind of playstyle that we want you to scout against this battle group.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you have more of a economy focus or disruption of economy focused side of the battle group, where with the siphon beacons, you can put them down on the territory or in the sector, and the resources will start getting drained from the opponent. And you really need to keep an eye out for those, especially, if you're not used to looking at your territory points, you might find that you have been siphoned for most of the duration of the game. And we also have abilities like Plunder, which are honestly really cool to engage with. Basically, your units get better through time just by plundering enemy weapons, or even like your own wreckage. If you lose a vehicle, it might be an opportunity to actually get some new weapons from it. And finally, we kind of round off that side of things with some fairly big abilities. One of them, Disruption Operation, which allows you to just choose an area and the enemy starts losing vision around it and also accuracy. Which is really good if you are scouting an area with your camouflage units and you want to start an operation there.
Yeah.
Just put down the ability and then move in. And that is paired up against Firestorm, which is somewhat of a callback to a Co-1 ability, but in this case, it's geared towards more area denial. So the idea is you scorch an area and the enemy cannot pass through that area for a duration of time, or they can, but they'll obviously get punished for it.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm really excited about some of the things that are coming, particularly in Battlefield Espionage, and I think that obviously pairs in tandem with the changes to scouting and detection. And I imagine that's sort of like a direct response to a lot of the camouflage and sort of concealment abilities that are going to be coming with this battle group, right?
Yeah, it definitely made a lot of sense to have a look at those with the introduction of this battle group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's just a lot more options in general to find camouflage, so our players will be able to have counterplay, and not just form the scout units, but it should bring back like some more users of like the scouting abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how players, utilize some of those maybe underutilized abilities or units in response to some of these new battle group abilities. So I'm kind of curious about maybe some of the counterplay to these battle groups, because anytime we introduce something new like this, there's there's always concerns like, oh, maybe this is too strong. So how should I as a player maybe tackle playing against the Australian defense, Darren? Because they got some really beefy defenses. They got the Bofors, which I'm excited to see again. The anti-tank emplacements. But I know players can sometimes be a little frustrated when playing against really defensive battle groups. So how do I play against them?
So we'll start with the left tree. So at least for fighting against like the big economy of the Australian defense battle group, like the big thing of the trucks is they're very slow once they're loaded, or just in general, they're even slower when loaded, but they're slow to begin with, so they're very easy to pick off if they don't have anyone protecting it. So like light vehicles are very good against it, ambushing infantry. And we've even had games where people would paradrop units behind the lines to go after the trucks.
Okay.
That's while like the enemy was distracted on the front, so they could steal the resources from that truck. So anything that can get near the truck will generally be able to destroy it, but obviously there are units suited to it, like raiding vehicles. Also, if we go further down outside the reinforced cache, which is just a resource cache, and the artillery tripwire, which you can sweep with minesweepers. The Archer is very powerful. It's more reminiscent to, if anyone remembers, Company of Heroes 2 tank destroyers, that you have extensive far range and damage. However, the Archer in itself is quite slow to move around the field, especially if you want it to be facing with its gun pointed. It's doing what it does historically. It moves faster in reverse and moves much slower when it's going forward.
Mhm.
Or so the counterplay to the archer is you can either outmaneuver it, forcing it to move the positions that it doesn't want. However, the archer itself is also very fragile and expensive for its cost because it takes on that sort of tank sniper role. It really needs to sit behind the line. It really doesn't want to brawl with enemy units just because it is a very easy investment to lose to units like anti-tank guns, and even cheaper units like martyrs can swarm it and take it down cost effectively if it's not being shielded. So there is a lot of ways to bring down the archer. It is because it is an extreme unit. It has extreme firepower, but it has some like very key weaknesses of like
Mhm.
low health, low speed, and mobility.
Okay. Any other sort of major counters to the other defensive aspects of the?
So the Australian light infantry, they're good infantry units as a combat unit. However, they lack the utility of like the Tommy in terms of like the roles that the Tommy can take on with their various upgrades. So even when you upgrade like the Australian light infantry with scope rifles, you're going to be missing things like snares. Australian light infantry can't do anything to vehicles for the
Mhm.
most part. They can only really fight infantry. So you can either fight them with vehicles, advanced infantry, depending on if the Australians are in a bad position or not, or you can try to control them with also weapons like guns because they do have a little bit more sight range with the scope rifles, but not enough to just lock to spot machine guns before they spot them. Where Tommies obviously have their flares to fire off into the fog of war, and yes, for the most part, though the best counter to Australian light infantry is just vehicle play,
Okay.
just because they're so they have nothing they can really do against it.
Okay.
And
Sorry. Go on.
as for the rest of the battle group, like the 2-pounder, it's very good against light vehicles, but it's not really going to scale into the late game against tank. And so if you have like Panzer IVs and Panzer IIIs pushing your line, the 2-pounder is only really going to provide like supporting fire. It's not going to be able to solo those vehicles, even if you have probably like 2 to 3 of the guns together. While for the defenses themselves, both the Bofors and the 17-pounder emplacement, neither of these have the 17-pounder can't deal with infantry, so it can be rushed up to. And the Bofors can't deal with heavier vehicles, but indirect fire is the primary way to get rid of those defenses because this battle group, for the most part, does not have any way to counterfire the artillery units.
Okay.
It lacks any sort of like real artillery unit that's not from the core of the roster. So you need to supplement and that with your own mortars or bishops. You don't really have like the coastal's ability to just zone out with the Obiche or
Mhm.
artillery overwatch.
Right.
You have to protect them with your own units so they can be bombed. And emplacements are not cheap. You can get them fairly early into the game, but you are making a big opportunity cost for going into these fuel heavy emplacements. It's where you might want a light vehicle much earlier in the game to put the pressure on the enemy rather than letting your enemy take the initiative. And they also have a reasonably long build time. So these do need time to be placed in 45 seconds and around for each.
Mhm.
And that makes it very easy if the enemy spots you building these to rush the emplacement and the builders to take down.
Right. And I imagine like it's the type of thing where you can't necessarily have too many of them, otherwise you're eating into your pop cap pretty
Yes, these
severely.
emplacements also take up population.
Cool. Miguel, what about battlefield espionage? You got all these units that are invisible. They're all concealed. You're taking away my resources. You're making it harder for me to see. How do I play against this battle group?
Yeah. So the main counter tool is scouting, which we are going to introduce. So the battle plays a lot around the fact that you need to get first strike off. And if obviously you're detected before then, you're not going to be able to do that. Same thing, to be able to get your kind of enhanced AT abilities off on enemy vehicles, you need to have that ambush set up. But if they scout you out, again, you cannot do that. So scouting against this battle group is the #1 counter. But there are a few other things to look out for. So the battle group itself is pretty munitions hungry. And it relies on the Fangpanzerwagen to generate some of those munitions. So that unit in itself, the vet ability is it generates munitions for you. So if you can destroy that vehicle against a DAC player, they'll struggle to use some of the abilities of the battle group. And there's also the plunder ability, right? So if the enemy is looking for wrecks to plunder, you can also destroy the wreckage, and the DAC player cannot make use of them. And another thing to look out for is the position of the beacon. So regardless if they go for the intel beacons or if they go for the siphon beacons, you can look for their positioning and try to destroy them with scout units. Especially with the beacons that steal your resources, you want to look at your territories and always be on the lookout for resources that are being stolen from you. So there's a few things you can do. There's also the transfer depots, which you should be on the lookout for because they give the DAC player some pretty good deals, especially for a faction that is usually manpower hungry. These transfer depots do help them a lot. But yeah, those are the main things that we wanted to kind of enhance in terms of counterplay. Especially the scouting is what you should be looking out for. And if your faction has access to flares or any sort of ability like that, that's the kind of premium counter because you don't even need to walk into the zone.
Okay. So just to clarify, with the Intel Disruption Beacon and the Sector Subterfuge Beacon, I know scout units can detect those. Can any other unit detect those? Like, is it a range thing or is it a specific unit thing?
Yeah, I'll let Darren speak to that one.
For detecting the beacon, regular beacons are just considered standard camouflage units. So like any unit that's a detector will pick them up at extended ranges, but you can also regular units if they get close enough to the beacons, similar to like the advanced infantry radio artillery beacons, you
Okay.
can find them and take them out. But the best units that are good for just like sweeping beacons, particularly siphon beacons, are units like the 4x4, the Humber, any of the fast moving light vehicles. You can just have these patrol your territory, destroy beacons as they're found. And while the DAC player might get a little bit of resources, if you destroy them fast enough, it is costing the DAC player quite a bit of manpower to build these beacons.
Right.
And we know DAC in general is quite manpower heavy compared to the other factions.
Right. So it can be pretty punishing if you lose one of those. Very cool. So I kind of want to talk about like our favorite parts of these battle groups because I just watching the videos, I'm just like really excited about them. I think they have a lot of really cool, abilities and units and a lot of fun flavor around them. I was super excited to see the Goliath come back. I think we're going to see some really fun
I haven't
memes
mentioned that one yet.
yes,
Montages must begin.
yes, so I'm sure we'll see lots of fun clips. So let's maybe talk about your favorite parts of each of these battle groups. Darren, I'm going to flip it on you. So what's your favorite part of the Battlefield Espionage battle group?
I think my favorite one is in general the Panzer Funkwagen, just because it has that aura around it, but you can also do a lot of things with it. It's a mine planter, it's a Goliath deliverer. It can also capture territory, and it can also what am I missing? Oh yeah, generate munitions. And like if you also go the Funk Panzer Wagon early, which is not hard because it's a core aspect of the battle group, you can also convert your existing half tracks into the Funk Wagon. So that always means like the DAC player can get access to this unit, which it's always nice to have. And well, the second ability I very much always enjoyed about this is, the Siphon Beacon, just like, aha, doesn't know it's there. I'm slowly stealing your resources.
Yeah.
Doesn't know how much he's losing and how much I'm gaining.
Miguel, favorite part of Battlefield Espionage?
Definitely the Goliath. Close second, probably Operation Scorpion. Just because I'm a pretty aggressive player myself, so I love to do those big camouflage operations on the enemy.
Cool. I remember seeing one of the first clips that you had shown me internally about that, and I was just like, "Oh man, this is a little silly." But again, I think there's going to be some interesting impacts on multiplayer games and even just playing against AI. I think will be fun with that. Let's talk about the Australian defense. Darren, what's your favorite part from the Aussies here?
There's quite a bit to it, but I think all us designers do enjoy having the truck in general because of its fun play and what it can create. Maybe because it does change the battlefield just by entering onto the field. Like, oh no, there's a truck. How are people going to react to it? Are they just going to let me take the resources? Are they going to suddenly push me and steal my truck's resources?
Mhm.
But also, one of my favorite units is probably the Archer, as well. Just having that very long, punchy tank destroyer, keep at max range, but it also will just die if you look away from it for a moment. It's just being that sort of glass cannon sniper unit, but in a vehicle form rather than infantry form.
Okay. Miguel, favorite part of the Australian defense?
I'm going to go with supply run as well.
Oh,
Cannot be
wow. Okay.
understated the amount of work that went into that ability. But it's so fun to engage with. I think for any game mode, really. It creates like this moment in the game where you're like, I need to destroy that truck if you're the enemy, and you're trying your hardest to do so. While if you're the one using the supply run, you're like, I want to protect this until it gets to my base, and it will give me like a big chunk of resources that will allow me to get this very nice vehicle, for example. I think it really adds a lot to the gameplay in a way that Company of Heroes series hasn't seen before.
Mhm.
Almost feels like a campaign mission suddenly.
Yeah.
Just like, oh no, I got to kill the truck. Mission objective
Yeah.
updated.
Yeah, I have visions of players sort of furiously typing to each other, "Get on the payload! Get on the payload!" Awesome. Okay, let's wrap things up. I know this has been a long video, and we kind of want to end things on a high note here. So, final thoughts, Darren, on these two new battle groups. How do you think they're going to affect the multiplayer meta, or just sort of shake up the game in
I
general?
think Australian defense is going to be more your conventional battle group in terms of like, oh, it's the Australian defense, and so you sort of react to it, but you still generally have those more specific build orders that are more versatile and able to deal with like the Australians. And so you might change up a few things, like maybe I go a vehicle a bit faster, or I try to bully the Australian light infantry in a different way that is not just like trying to fight them head on with standard infantry, but a more supportive, like with machine guns. But the what the heck is back? DAC Battlefield Espionage. This is definitely gonna be one to look out for, because it doesn't seem like all like impressive at the start, because it doesn't have like those big shiny combat units that some of the other battle groups might have, but it does have a lot of like danger that it gives players, because you're ambushing and you can bring like large amounts of forces from behind camouflage
Yeah.
onto the enemy's doorstep. It really makes the enemy need to play or have detector units nearby their main force, or at least like sprinkle mines and other or things forward of the line to keep like these camouflage units back to as like an early warning. But it also does mean like certain light vehicles and like the 4x4 with its commander, or just like skyrocket and like how important they are in keeping this battle group at bay in the early game.
And I expect players to take a little bit longer to figure out the Battlefield Espionage versus the British one.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that the first time I played against someone who knew what they were doing with Battlefield Espionage on the team, I was very sad. I was just like, oh, this is what this is supposed to do. This
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't ready for it. Yeah, Miguel, yeah, what are your sort of final thoughts on these two battle groups, and how they're going to sort of impact the game?
Yeah, I definitely think that, well, they'll impact the game in different ways. The British one, I think players will play a lot differently with it, just from the fact that that's a supply run. I think we'll see a lot more of trying to get deep into the enemy lines to try and destroy the truck. And also, this is our introduction to kind of the first vehicle of its kind, the Archer, in the sense that it's like this very long range anti-tank vehicle. So that will be a very different kind of playstyle that the British are used to, that they are missing that role in their army. For the DAC one, I think they already play in an aggressive way, so it probably won't change much in that regard. But I think when you play against this battle group, you'll probably be changing the way you play. So it's more like, as the player playing against this, you'll now be using a lot more scout units. So it'll probably make this patch a lot more, or not even the patch, but the playing against this battle group, a lot more about how you use your scout units. That's a lot different than currently what you see on live.
Okay.
Yep, but there's definitely air support center might make a resurgence of it. At Battlefield
Yes.
espionage becomes common because that is free detection and recon that the
Yeah.
American players would always have.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like I said, I'm excited to see these two new battle groups in players' hands, and excited to see how they're utilizing them in game. So I think we'll probably leave things there for now. Thank you, Darren and Miguel, so much for joining us today, and thank you for the hard work on both of these battle groups. So players can get their hands on them with this update, and be sure to let us know what you think. So thanks so much, both of you.
No, thank
Yep,
you.
thank you.